Welcome to Going the Distance Live. On this episode of the podcast, we have fellow vasculitis warrior Cindy Abbott. If you're not familiar with Cindy, well, you should be. She is the only female to have ever climbed Mount Everest and completed the 1,000-mile dog sled race, the Iditarod in Alaska. Both feats she did not tackle until she was over the age of 50 and had already been diagnosed with granulomatosis with polyangiitis, which is the same vasculitis that I suffer from myself. Cindy has been a tremendous inspiration for thousands in the rare disease community. She's certainly been an inspiration for myself. When I first started kind of searching other inspirational stories back in 2015, when I first dipped my toes into the vasculitis outreach and awareness, I stumbled upon her story. And since then, I've admired her from afar. And I was super nervous asking to have her come on this podcast because I've really looked up to her and was really excited to kind of pick her brain. Cindy also has a book. It's called Reaching Beyond the Clouds. It's available on Amazon.com in Kindle and paperback formats as well. I'll put the links to those in the show notes. And Cindy and I, as you'll find out through this conversation, actually kind of not just have a lot in common, obviously because of our rare disease, but in a lot of other things that we've chose to do in life. And reading her book years ago and then again recently, I find her such a kindred spirit, and I hope everybody can learn something and learn as much as I did from this conversation with her. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Cindy Abbott. All right, you should get a prompt now that we are recording. All right, welcome to Going the Distance Live, Cindy.
Hi there, Brandon.
Thank you for taking the time to chat. I know you have been very busy lately with stuff with the dogs recently and trying to get everything taken care of here, kind of during the quarantine and stuff. So, actually, why don't you tell us a little bit about like what you're doing right now and how you're handling kind of this pandemic with the lifestyle that you and your husband have set up for yourselves there in Alaska?
Well, about 4 years ago, we moved from California to Alaska, and with the timing of the pandemic, it's actually a very good place to be right now. And I fill my days with working outside. We have 2 acres of basically forest. And I also go to the kennel where we have 42 wonderful doggies. They're Alaskan sled dogs, and spend our days taking care of them and working on the property. We just had spring melt here in Alaska. So it's a big transition from having snow on the ground to not, and everything's green now. And we have 19 hours of daylight right now. And so it's a pretty awesome time. And quite frankly, being quarantined has not been really a hardship for us because we live off the grid anyway. So our days are full of loves and hugs from the dogs and beautiful Mother Nature.
That sounds incredible. I'm kind of jealous. I inspired to live off the grid more than I do. Having been a mountain boy myself for years, and then 2 years ago moved down into the flatlands not flatlands, but the Piedmont area of North Carolina with my girlfriend. I certainly miss being in nature and kind of off the grid and in those little communities of nature that just, I don't know. I feel more at peace when I'm there, but luckily I still make trips. It's only 2 hours away, so I still make trips. So if people don't know, I guess, a little bit about who you are and what your story is, we have, I guess, here on this podcast, for a terrible pun, we're rare air here. We have the only vasculitis patient to climb Everest and complete the Iditarod. Still, are you still the only female to complete both of those as well?
Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, your host here is the only vasculitis patient to break 4 minutes in the mile, which is for, I don't know why, I guess because they always feel the need to compare things in sports and across disciplines, but the 4 minute mile. And I think it's because both of them happen around the same time as well, to the first person climbing Everest and the first sub 4 minute mile were human feats, to say the least. And they've always just kind of sortably been linked. I don't know why. But the 4 minute mile, I guess, is kind of considered the Everest of track and field. And then you've managed to do those after getting diagnosed as a vasculitis patient. So what were some of your initial symptoms and kind of what I call it, the journey to diagnosis? What was that like for you? Kind of when did it start, and kind of how long did it take you to get diagnosed?
Let's see, I'm doing the math backwards. Probably in the early 1993-ish is when I started noticing blood in the urine and extreme fatigue and sinus problems and vision problems and just all these really seemingly unrelated things. I went to specialists for each one of them, and nobody could figure out what was going on, and that just went on. And then I got into somebody with MS, a doctor that treated MS, and they misdiagnosed me with multiple sclerosis, and that was sort of horrific. And then we found out that wasn't right, and it took 14 years of doing this, going to doctors and getting the I don't knows, or here, just take this medication and see if it works. I'm like, I'm not taking a medication on a guess. Are you crazy? And, it was really frustrating because I taught health science during all this, so I could do research on my own and make fairly educated decisions on whether to take that medication or not. And I kept thinking, what about people who don't have that knowledge base or resource base? Do they actually take that pill on a guess? So it was frustrating on several levels, going through that I don't know period.
Yeah, I feel the same way, because that's actually something that we also have in common. I have my master's in exercise physiology, and I believe you have a degree in kinesiology.
It's kinesiology, but my emphasis was exercise physiology.
Okay. So, yeah. So like you've got, and then obviously as a patient, you end up with half a medical degree anyway, just to read your medications and understand your lab work. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I know in talking with so many patients that I have over the years, and just people in general, I mean, even just people in my family, friends of mine, but when doctors just tell people to take stuff, they just take them. And so it's kind of alarming, honestly. And, I hope one of the things that will change with, a better understanding of medicine here in the future, because I think it's obviously, everybody's too quick to prescribe a pill for something. And when you look at so many vasculitis patient stories, the dealing with so many different doctors, dealing with specialists, and not having that overarching look of like, and I get it. It's kind of hard because you are dealing with a rare disease, and not everybody that comes in with blood in their urine or like some messed up sinuses are going to end up having, GPA and, being part of the few that have that. So it's understandable that, they don't test everybody for it when they come in the door. But with that said, you would feel that there's just a better path to diagnosis. And it's one thing I know that the Vasculitis Foundation works on. And, it's one thing that I've talked about numerous times too, as well as on this podcast, of like cutting down that time to diagnosis, because 14 years is a long time to suffer and not know what was wrong. What was kind of the final straw, and did things get really touch and go for you before that gave the doctors that kick of like, oh, this is what this is? What was that kind of process like, that after so long of, those final few weeks or final few months before you got your diagnosis?
So I was getting very frustrated with the whole thing. And so I finally did some research and self-referred myself up to Jules Stein Eye Institute at UCLA for my vision problems. I figured I was going to go blind in about 6 weeks at the rate I was losing vision, and no one was able to help me at all. So I went up there and they actually started treating my eyes, vasculitis in the eyes. So at least, the actual thing was being treated, and that went on and getting injections and things until one day I was walking in a local store and I got really dizzy and vertigo and almost fell down, and I'd had a central retinal vascular occlusion in my left eye, basically a major blood vessel burst. So I got home and I called the doctor, and they're like, okay, we'll get up here. And it was a Friday afternoon, so I couldn't get up till Monday. And
Yeah, why doesn't our health just work on a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday schedule? I mean, can it not get
get in the car and drive up here? I go, by the time I drive from 2 hours, 3 hours in traffic, you guys are gonna be home. And then they said, go to the emergency room. And I've been to the emergency room. I already know I'm not going to the emergency room because they're just gonna 8 hours of test and send me home with I don't know. So yeah. I said, I stay home and I'll come up on Monday. And that Monday is when they did the scans and told me what happened. And they said, two of the super specialists, wonderful men, came in the room and they said, it's not just your eyes, something's going on in your body and you need to go see a rheumatologist across the street. And I went a couple days later and saw that rheumatologist for the first time. And he immediately started the battery of tests. So I had to lose my vision. It was permanent loss to lead me to the diagnosis, which is a fair trade.
Yeah, it's a fair trade to stay alive, I guess. Right. Like, if that's what it took. If that's what it took. So you've got your diagnosis, and this is late 2000s ish.
Yeah, 2007.
Okay. Was it Cytoxin and prednisone? What was the kind of the course of treatment to begin with? Do you remember?
For that appointment, because I knew I was going to come in, I already knew he was going to tell me I had it. The symptoms, once I researched it, matched so well.
Oh, it's terrifying when you're like, you just keep going down symptom after symptom after symptom after symptom. You're like, yeah, I got all those.
So I actually walked in the room and said, I have this, don't I? And he was like, yeah, because I don't, how is that to have to tell people that day after day after day? So I just thought I'd tell him that I know I have it and he could confirm it. Anyway, but I also had to research the list of treatments. And by the way, those are pretty scary treatments. And some of the treatments they're using now weren't even available then. But yeah, the first one was the steroids and things. So I actually looked at him and I said, I'm going to opt out of the highest level of treatment and opt for the second level. And he was like, well, but we talked about it. We talked about the differences and the risks and all that stuff. And I just said, I'm informed. I want to go this route. And it worked for me.
Okay. Yeah. So that's one thing I told you before we started this that I reread your book, and the one thing that I found so empowering that I think that a lot of other patients can learn from is just your willingness to like dig your hands in there, and I understand having the background knowledge that you have is with your traditional schooling, right? Not just like stuff you've had to learn because of your health, but like, your traditional schooling and what you in the field that you worked in the health sciences, like gives you a base knowledge understanding. But having that, because I didn't have, like, I had that knowledge, but I didn't have that strength until like the last couple of years to take a little bit more control over like, and have conversations with my doctors. It was more of like, okay, well, whatever you think is best. And I was literally floored, reading some of that in your book, that just how you kind of took it by the reins and were like, no, this is what I want to do. Was it that background kind of, and your knowledge that you felt comfortable making that decision? Because I think ultimately that's like the decisions maybe that a lot of patients are scared to take because they're afraid they're going to take the wrong one. Whereas it's like, I kind of feel like, you would rather take those reins and be the ones that, and then instead of that power being in somebody else's hands.
Exactly. Well, and I have access to, not only is that my nature, my ability to analyze and things, but I have access to the university's medical database. And so I had access to a lot of information. Now you got to be able to read that stuff, which is a little challenging, but I
Yeah.
have the training in that. But it's just part of my nature to inform consent, get all the information, and then decide. I mean, it's the same with, climbing Everest or running the Iditarod. It's a risk, but I'm informed and I'm willing to take that risk based on what I know. And so that's sort of my nature of me, is even down, as young as a child, I was always like that.
Yeah, that's inspiring. And I feel like also something that people will ask you, and I just did, but like ask you like where that comes from. And it's sort of the same nature that allowed you to kind of tackle these giant challenges like Everest or the Iditarod, and throwing yourself into them. Because it's something that, like, when it's been part of you since you were kind of a child, it's hard to explain. And you probably have been asked this, especially after climbing Everest and stuff, like, well, what motivated you, what got you going? And it's like, you kind of can't, at least for me, I can't put into words really. I mean, I've been running since I was 10. Like, I really know nothing else. And the challenges that my sport has brought me, like, it's almost innate. I literally don't know anything else, and I often don't know what drives me. And I feel like, reading your story, you're kind of the same way and wired that same way. If you know, struggling to communicate with somebody that has trouble getting off the couch, as far as motivation wise, not obviously health problems aside, is just like something that's kind of far into us. Do you feel that same way? Because I know I do sometimes, and it's really hard for me to communicate or describe with words in a fair way what keeps me kind of ticking and going.
Oh, that's exactly. When people ask me, there is no way to explain it. There's only the feelings inside of me, and they're powerful. They drive me in situations where normal people would. I mean, I can't even explain it. As you know, you go through all kinds of levels of different pain, and just, like you said, there's just no words.
Yeah, and I've tried and failed miserably.
Yeah.
Multiple times. And I think the closest I got to describing it was like, like, desire breeds dedication, right? Like, when you have an extreme desire to do something that that leads you to do the right things, to be dedicated to what you want to do. Like when you were preparing for Everest, or when you're preparing for the Iditarod, like those things that you have to do so that you're ready for those moments. That's what drives you. But like, that desire is just like, I mean, I often wish, I mean, I'd be a billionaire if I could, but if I could bottle that up and give it in pills or sell it in an energy drink to people, I think we would be really rich people. But
I'm going business with you.
yeah. If I come up with it, I will. You'll be the first person I call, for sure. But like that desire, and I know the book, you said you were watching. If my memory serves me correctly, you were watching literally a documentary, and Everest came on, about a documentary about Everest, and you were just like, I want to do that. Am I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I was at Everest Beyond the Limit, and it was a 4-part series. And quite frankly, there was a lot of death and dying on the series, which is the reality.
Yeah, no.
Most people would watch it and go, "Oh, I'm never going to do that." And I watched it, and as soon as it was over, my husband's next to me. I turned to him and I go, "I believe I have to go do that." And I'd never climbed a mountain in my life.
Yeah, and it's that sort of like call to action that just is so, you don't know where it comes from. And and the fact that like there's and the number of people, I mean, how many people have said in their life that they want to climb Everest but never do? Um, and the thing that like, I mean, from that moment that you were sitting on that couch till May 23rd, 2010, how many years passed?
That was the timing of it all was quite strange because I watched that documentary in May of 2007.
Mm-hmm.
The retinal occlusion in my eye happened the following month. And then I got diagnosed. It took a couple of months to diagnose me. So within a span of 3 months, I uttered those words, lost my vision in my left eye, was diagnosed. And then I stayed on my training program, which my doctors were not really happy with me about. So, yeah, so the timing was really bad, actually, or good. I don't know, good or bad. It just is. So I was still being dosed up on my medications, which were making me really sick all the time. You know how that is, and right when you start feeling better, they dose you up again. And but I had that big mountain in Argentina to climb. And so I was still really sick and stuff, but I was like, I can be responsible and do this. I don't have a death wish. And so I just carried on.
Yeah, it's like you don't have you don't have a death wish. It's a life wish. And
exactly.
Yeah, and there's just these things, especially when you get confronted with your own mortality, and realize that so much of it can be out of your control, right? With something like vasculitis, for some of us, it seems to give us this voracious appetite and license to kind of live life a little harder. And I don't want to say recklessly, but it's like, I don't know. Like, I can't wait for this. Like, like you said, like, you don't know when you might lose your vision. And if it's, at the rate that it was going at the time, you're like, well, I better get this thing out of the way or I might not be able to see and then not do that. And then, then I can't climb Everest. So it kind of gives you an appetite to just really get after it. But some people would think the doctors probably think it's reckless. And I know the doctors, when I asked them, I was like, oh, hey, you think I'll be able to run again? They were like, yeah, but they didn't understand. Luckily in my case, they didn't understand what I was asking. The training that it requires to be an elite athlete. And they were kind of a little bit naive too. So they're like, yeah, like people exercise and work out after they get diagnosed. Like, you should be able to run again. But they and that kind of also started entering the phase of like me not asking questions, so I couldn't get told no.
Yeah.
Right. It's like if you don't ask that question, which is a terrible, as a patient, it's a terrible place to be in. But like if you don't ask all those questions, then they can't tell you no, and then they kind of can't, squash your hopes and dreams or whatever. But in your case, you obviously, I mean, you're going to an extreme altitude on Everest, so and you've got to, you've kind of not necessarily get the doctor's consent, but like, you got to get enough medication. The thing that I thought about is just like the thing that like the routine of having to take all of your medication, and while you're climbing Everest, there's so much of it's on a schedule, but you also have your body, which is also on a schedule. And if you don't take certain medications at certain times, then it can just turn into a nightmare. You could end up mixing a bomb in your stomach and ending up in incredible pain, or just wreck your intestinal tract because you didn't take stuff with enough food, or you took it with food and you weren't supposed to take it with food. And then now you're going to throw up everywhere. So like, managing that and the intensity of managing that alone, like I had to stop reading your book at night because I generally read before I go to bed, but like I was like getting a lot of anxiety reading it because just the intensity of those moments. Cause I had moments where I just ended up away from my medication for a little bit of time, or was a little late, and when like most patients have had situations like that, or when you're on high doses of prednisone, forget to take it, and then you kind of end up in withdrawal. And so like I was getting super stressed out. Like my palms would get sweaty while I was reading. And like you talking about some of those moments where you're having to like really like shoot for narrow windows on stuff, and kind of talk us through some of the stress of that, the added stress of that, because like obviously climbing Everest is difficult enough. Doing it with a rare disease is nearly impossible. So how did you manage all of that? Because like that is just enough of a cluster to 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 like give me anxiety.
Well, luckily, I'm anally OCD, and
That
it,
helps, I guess.
it's bad, but it keeps me really, really organized. And but the timing of the medication in a extreme environment where you're basically living out of a backpack in another part of the country or the world, so you got to start with like twice as much medicine in case it got rained on, it got lost. I don't know, you got caught in an avalanche. You had to have it on your persons, although there was a lot of elements around the medication, not just the timing of it. It was like if I'm on the mountain and something happens to my medications, I don't have them. And
Yeah, that
so
was my first thought was like, how did she get insurance approval to get that amount of medication ahead of time? Like that was like literally like one of my first thoughts earlier in the book.
I
I was
think
like,
I just used the travel, it's a travel exclusion
mhm.
thing. You're going on a trip out of country and there's no way to get those medications and not,
Yeah,
where I'm,
can't just walk into a CVS and
yeah. And, but the timing was so tricky. It really, and like you said, around meals, my main medication, I had to take it 3 times a day. I couldn't take it. Let's see, I forgot the timing, the 2 hours. I had to go 2 hours without food, take it, and then go for an hour before. So it was a 3 hour window 3 times a day that I had to take this medication, work on a climbing schedule and an eating schedule. And it was just, it was challenging.
yeah, the mental fortitude, obviously, to put yourself in extreme conditions is just um all inspiring, because like I said, like I got a lot of anxiety, and I knew what would happen. Like I knew you were still alive, right? Like I'd seen pictures of you at the top of the mountain with the Nord banner. Like I knew that, but like here I am reading this book and I'm just like like just crippled with the anxiety around all of that, because of just being a patient and knowing what all goes on with that, and just trying to just figure out like how you did that. And then like the coughing fits, that because you ended up with you coughed pretty much the entire time you were on the mountain, basically.
Yep. Entire time.
So yeah, and so like the window, and for people that don't know much about Everest, like it's not like just obviously going on a hike, but from the time that you left Southern California till the time that you got back, how long was that?
60 days to the day.
Okay, so you're talking about 2 months time that you are that you're gone, that you're away from home, you're away from your family. You are basically isolated with a couple other, because you did this by yourself. I know there's the other people that are doing couples or with friends or in teams of people they're probably a little bit closer with, but you did it with people that you didn't know ahead of time, and you're gone from home for away from civilization for most of it, and here you are, you're not resting well because you're coughing through the night. It's already hard enough to sleep at altitude, which I have a little bit of experience with, because I have been to, I have trained and lived at like 10,000 feet outside of Boulder, Colorado, for a short period of time. And then I sleep in an altitude tent, during different parts of my training cycle. So I'll sleep at 10 or 12,000 feet. And I just know what that's like and how uncomfortable that can be. And what that's like trying to get acclimated to. and how that disrupts my sleep and how I have to kind of plan that into my training a bit, because I know early on when I'm doing those things that like I'm not going to be at my best, but like you got to wake up without much sleep and be on your game. And the treacherous, like how treacherous that mountain is, you know, until I read your book the first time, like I didn't truly understand, like, that it's a big feat to get done, but like the intricacies of like the mental, like how like on your game you have to be for hours at a time, traveling through some of the really difficult parts of the mountain. So I was like your kind of motto of just like 10 feet at a time and just like looking just barely basically 10 feet in front of you and then worrying about what's next. Where did you kind of come up with that? Because I know you had already had that motto when you got to Everest. And I think at least from an outsider's perspective, like that helped you climb. That motto kind of kept you having that motto to kind of just keep coming back to, like literally allowed you to climb Everest 10 feet at a time and make it up and down alive, without completely freaking out. So like, did you recognize that you needed something like that to help you get through those situations, or is it just something that just kind of came to you?
No, when I was in Argentina, this would be 2.5 years before Everest, my first big climb, Concagua. Now I'm functionally blind in my left eye, and my vision, because the disease has attacked the vessels in my right eye too, so my vision is definitely reduced. And we were hiking in the valley. You have to hike in to get to the mountain down there. And I realized that I wasn't seeing what was really in front of me on the ground, the boulders, because the eyes were filling in or making up information. And at home, you're walking around your house, you're walking down a sidewalk, it's not critical that you're not really seeing what's there. When you're stepping on boulders and you don't see that it's what's really there, you could end up being seriously hurt or fall off or something. So then I slowed down and had to learn to focus on what was really in front of me. And that's where I said, okay, here's this 10 feet. I'm going to look and see what it is, walk on it, and then take the next feet, see what it, and so that literally developed like that. And then it became used for everything I do.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Having a mantra or a motto that you can kind of rely on in difficult situations, that can keep the focus narrow. I mean, having big objectives and big goals, I think are super important to not just patients, but people in general in life. And it's like, it's one thing I talk, because like I also like coach some adult athletes, that are chasing goals, whether it's like a Boston Marathon qualifier or like an age group time that's going to like get them an All-American certificate or something like that. Talking with them about having big goals, but like managing things on the small level and just taking things like one step at a time. That like the fact that you kind of arrived at it the way that you did out of necessity, is very Zen, is very Zen-like, and I think very powerful, and something that a lot of patients too, because like you can get caught up in like, well, the next test or the next blood work or the next day or that next set of treatment that's coming the next day or the next week or the next month that you're going to feel like garbage from. But like it kept you planted in the here and now, and helped you, I mean, I think achieve a lot. And I assume you kind of use that in your Iditarod racing career as well. I mean, that wasn't really covered in the book. So maybe you could talk through a little bit of how you were able to apply that to the Iditarod race.
Oh yeah, it's the same kind of thing, just a little bit faster, since I was moving a little faster with my dog team. And
you had a little assistance.
Yeah, big muscle dogs. But same exact kind of thing. You don't think about a 1,000-mile race. Of course, you have to plan for it. There's a difference.
Yeah.
But when I'm running a leg with the dogs, and that's really all I worry about is that one leg I'm running with the dogs, whatever the distance is, 30 miles, 50 miles. And again, I've got that leg I'm focusing on, I'm planning for. But honestly, I'm out in the wilderness with these dogs, and I'm just looking at what's literally within my view, my eyesight, and that's what I'm dealing with. Because what's up ahead of that, I don't know. I'll find out when I get there, and I'll deal with it when I get there. But I've got to get through this section right here. And so it absolutely transferred to running dogs across the Alaskan wilderness.
Yeah, and what kind of? I mean, you climbed Everest, and obviously, that's a huge feat. And like we said at the top of the podcast, like you then completed the Iditarod, and you're the only female to ever complete both of those incredible feats of human willpower and athleticism and determination. Did you know that, like when you decided to do the Iditarod and do something else incredibly crazy, that you would be the only female that had done both? Were you aware of that at all?
I didn't know that. In fact, Lance Mackey is the one that pointed it out to me, because I wasn't focused on getting what's the word, getting titles or doing things.
Yeah.
I just wanted to run the Iditarod.
You didn't do it for the Nord plaque.
Right. I just that was nice, by the way. That was really something.
Is yours clear as well and not able to read?
No, mine is like an Olympic medal.
Oh wow. Okay, mine's like a clear little plaque thing, and it's like sits on a shelf, and nobody that can see it can read it because it's clear.
Oh, mine's in a wonderful little case, just like Olympic medal, I imagine. I don't have Olympic medal, but
yeah. Neither do I.
Although mushing dogs is an Olympic sport, just it's not active.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
I should be more familiar. Is it I assume obviously it's not a summer Olympic sport. So did they take it out of the Olympics then?
I'm not sure how it devolved, but there is a group in the lower 48 that's still part of the organization. They run more sprint type races, so shorter, faster, more like you.
Okay. Yeah, the long stuff, I think that's why a lot of it is just kind of foreign to me, because I mean, my race that I run is roughly 4 minutes, or hopefully not that long on a good day. So focusing for the extreme long periods of time has always been a struggle for me. And it's only been in the last couple of years that I've been able to focus over some of the longer distances. I was always terrible at long runs and stuff in college, and post-collegiately, I got a little bit better at it, but it's only been in the last couple of years that I've been able to appreciate and get a lot better at managing like 16, 18, and 20-mile long runs, which take, the most like 2 hours to do. So that's why it's in some ways kind of the mindset akin to like even the ultra marathon running, because it is like when people are running 100 or 200 miles or 400 miles or for 6 days or 7 days or whatever, incredible feat that somebody's trying to, I think at some point, run across America under a certain time. Like, so, they're doing these extreme long things, and it's so foreign to my brain and my understanding of how people kind of get through that stuff. Because so much of my stuff is immediate gratification. And so I'm just enamored with it. And love reading about it. And am fascinated by it. Like, for somebody that enjoys the mile, like, I was just baffled last week when a guy that's a famous ultra marathon runner decided to break the 100-mile treadmill record like on a Saturday, because he had nothing else better to do with his life during quarantine than to run for a little over 12 hours on his treadmill. So those feats are just something that I strive to understand better, and I know it's probably sort of kind of how I don't understand, because like people will tell me that running a mile is too hard for them, people that have run marathons. So it's all kind of, I think sometimes it's something that you might have a natural affinity to, but it's just I don't know. I've been enamored with the longer stuff and how people just keep kind of clawing their way through stuff day in, day out in those situations. Because how long is the Iditarod day wise?
For me, the speed I race at is my quickest time was 12 days and 2 hours, and my
Mhm.
longest time was 13 days and 11 hours. And
Yeah, and
that's
so
top. The clock starts when you pull the hook at go
mhm.
and ends when you cross the finish line. So it's game on. There's no breaks.
Yeah, and so like, and then and you're carrying everything because it's outside of like the I know there's like stops along the way, right?
Yeah,
Um,
there might be villages
mhm.
where actually, remote native villages out there, or there might be nothing where I just stop and camp with the dogs.
Okay. Yeah, so like checkpoints, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah,
I
checkpoints.
was I was grasping at a word there and I
Yeah,
couldn't find it.
those places where we can resupply. So they bring in via a bush plane our supplies that we send out, so I can restock my sled with most of it's dog food, honestly.
Yeah, they require a lot of energy
Oh yes.
consumption. Does that like uh I actually had a friend from college actually that actually did some of, and this just came, I can't believe I hadn't thought about this before now. That actually did, he was an exercise science person as well, and he actually went up and actually I kind of lost contact with him after he did this because I actually don't know where he ended up. But a friend from school that actually ended up doing doing some research on sled dogs as part of his exercise science stuff. Um, and I vaguely remember uh, seeing something that he had published or something about it afterwards, but they were looking at, and this is, and I might butcher this, so I apologize, and I'll have to go look this up later, and I'll put it in the show notes if I butcher it real bad. But like sled dogs, they found actually get more efficient when they switch over to burning fat from burning like carbohydrates and glycogen. Uh, so like humans, if I remember like, or not remember correctly, humans, like when we start burning fat, like it's kind of like when people hit the wall in the marathon or an ultra marathon, most of the time it's when they switch to burning fat and they're not getting as much fuel from those cells because it's requiring more energy to burn it. Sled dogs are actually the opposite. I think I remember him talking about or something, or me reading the study on it or something. Do you know anything about that?
I have not seen that research,
Mhm.
but probably when I'm out racing, I'm trying to. The majority of their calories they are fed is protein,
Mhm.
very little carbohydrate really, and then I'm going to ramp up their fat if it's cold out,
Okay.
just more calories in them. So without actually seeing research, just from the practical application, is they're definitely functioning on protein.
Yeah, so that would line up with that sort of fuel, the keto fad right now that everybody seems to love. Is it's apparently good for those dogs. But yeah, like that sort of feeding um percentages roughly probably do line up with that. Um what is your fueling like when you're out there? Because obviously you've got to stay on point as well and be um were you having to manage medications and stuff too as well when you were doing the Iditarod, and um was that as complicated?
Yeah, it's even more difficult because we are out totally exposed to the weather. So to protect my pills from not being destroyed by getting wet or lost, because there's a lot of crashes out there too. Um, so I got to make sure they don't go flying into the river, or something if I don't make a curve. And So I always have extra meds sent out at those checkpoints we talked
Hmm.
about. So I have extra reserves, and then in Nome at the finish line, I have a whole nother set of pills, and then my husband has a set of pills. If I run out of pills somewhere, I don't have pills, he can, if there's a post office at a village, it's, the pill thing is a big deal, but then I have to be able to take them. And quite frankly, in their sections of the trail, you're busy just trying to survive that section of the trail. And so pill management on the Iditarod is much more difficult than, say, Everest. Um, I don't even know what your first question was.
The like fueling. So what is
Oh,
what is fueling like for a day? How long are you out there for, like, each day on the sled, and how do you stay fueled? Because I mean, for me, I would just try to mainline coffee all day, which I know probably wouldn't be a good
you know,
strategy.
coffee is like something you want to avoid completely because of the dehydration factor. But we run on run rest cycles. So in a 24-hour period there, I just run and then rest my dogs. If I'm stopped, I may get 45 minutes to an hour rest. This
Hmm.
is per 24-hour period.
Okay.
So there's very little rest for the mushers. The dogs are getting far more rest, but while they're resting, I am cooking for them. I'm getting ready for the next run for them. I'm caring for them. I'm melting water for them. Um, I'm constantly working for the dogs. So my eating is very forced because you just lose your appetite completely because you're so tired and working so hard, that you really have to manage your weight, your
Yeah.
intake, or you're going to crash and burn, and you got those dogs to care for. So that's a huge challenge, and I plan 6 months ahead. I'm getting stuff ready. I'm Ziploc, sealing mealing stuff up, sending it out, and then when you're out there, what you think you're going to want to eat, you won't eat, and so you've got to send out like 4 or 5 different things with the hope that one of them will end up in your mouth.
That that sounds stressful.
It is. Because even though you're not hungry, you don't want to eat what you brought, you have to eat. And
Hmm.
yeah, higher up on Everest was the same kind of thing. Because your body turns to cannibalizing itself.
Yeah.
Uh, and at some point, like at Camp 4, it's just sort of pointless to eat because your body at that point is not digesting food. It's shunted the blood to the brains and vital organs. You're basically shutting down up there.
Yeah.
And so to eat is sort of irrelevant, but drinking is relevant. Of course, hydration is always an important thing. So the eating actually, although it's really necessary, it's just a weight loss program.
So, uh, so if anybody's looking to lose some weight, just sign up for an Everest climb or an Iditarod race.
Yeah.
Extreme Hollywood diets. So did you have any? Because like I know for some of like the crazy ultra racing and stuff that goes on, or adventure racing, they have like special bars and stuff that people have made. Is that stuff that you've had experience with or done at all, or is it just all like stuff that you're prepping?
I tried that in the beginning and all this because I can break down a food and what it does in my body really easily because I specialized in bioenergetics.
Oh,
So
really?
that's like part of my DNA is like automatically breaking it down to how my cells are going to use it for what kind of activity I'm doing. So I tried all this fancy stuff and honestly, gets back down to having real food.
Hmm.
That's what you really want to eat out there. I mean, me anyway, is real food, not bars, not goos,
Hmm.
it's real food.
Yeah, give your body something um, that's it's not going to waste. The calories aren't wasted. Um, I think it is. And is that something like the real food thing? Do you health wise, is that um, when you're not doing something extreme like Everest or the Iditarod, what's your what is your what I mean, you kind of went through what your daily life like now is. Um have you changed your nutrition at all? Because I get asked that question all the time, especially as once they find out not only that I'm an athlete but that I coach stuff, they ask me tons of nutrition questions. Is the nutrition something that you've changed at all since being a patient? Is there any things that do and don't work for you that you know of, or do you just kind of eat what you want?
Nutrition did not change for me. We've always maintained a very healthy diet. I do have days when I go out to dinner and I just eat whatever I want, because I don't want to be deprived of anything or feel deprived of anything, but you still want to have a healthy diet. But a simple version of it, all these fancy things, these diets going on right now, I just stick to the simple basics of what my body needs and call it a day. I get irritated with all this marketing and stuff out there. I'm sorry, didn't mean to get on that. But I just eat regular healthy foods, and then yes, once in a while I go get an ice cream sundae or something.
Okay. I actually, you were breaking up a little bit there. This only time actually this whole entire recording that the internet connection's gone a little bad.
Okay.
I got at the end of that all I heard was, but sometimes you'll go out for ice cream. So I apologize that I'm gonna have to ask you to repeat that.
Oh, so when I eat, we've always had a healthy diet. When I was diagnosed, it didn't change anything for me. And we have a very basic, I just stick to the basics of nutrition. I don't get all caught up in all these fancy fads and diets and quasi theories. I read the research and I eat responsibly. And I get quite irritated actually with all this marketing and these weird diets that people go on that are actually, some of them are quite harmful. The fact that 3 million people are eating, all protein and that's it, including the fat. Yeah, I'll check your heart attack stats in about 20 years. But anyway, I'm getting lecturing.
No, yeah, well, it's somebody that's mildly educated on those topics, like myself, and then somebody that's high, if that the bioenergetics being your specialty, and understanding what happens when any sort of food and what it's composed of when it goes in your body, where it's going, how it's being processed, what the body's response to that food then is, and where it's going to go, how it's going to get stored, how your body's going to process it and then ultimately use it as energy, because that's ultimately really what food is energy for our bodies. The fad diet stuff, it drives me up the wall as well. If one more person tells me to eat like raspberry ketones and elderberry extract and but yeah, no, I thought the thing that I tell people all the time too is, and the best advice is just like eat real food, right? Like just eat real food, right? Eat things that come out of the ground, eat animals, eat real food, like eat things that are real. Shop around the outside of the grocery store if that's, if you, obviously not everybody has the capability to grow their own food and stuff, but like, shop around the outside of the grocery store. There's not too many things in the middle that, need to be, going in a shopping cart. Like sugary cereal is just not good for anybody. It tastes delicious, but it's just not good. But then, don't feel bad about, sitting down and eating a whole large pizza if you,
Exactly.
you gotta live a little bit. So
that pizza was my go-to food. You're going to laugh at this because I test food. So on a race or on a climb, I'll test a certain food item to see if in fact I really will eat it when the going is tough. And on the Iditarod, I found out that Taco Bell bean and cheese burritos, and pepperoni pizza were the foods. I know that because I sent them out as a test run one year, the burritos, and I only so many, and I was every stop I'd be looking, do I have a burrito at this stop to eat? And I would actually eat it. And so this last race I did that, I know. And I found on that race somebody, because mushers, if they don't use their food, they can put it on a table that's marked, and other mushers can bring in their food and switch it out. Like I said, if you don't want what you brought, you can go get somebody else's stuff because they didn't want what they brought either. And there was a pepperoni pizza. And it was the best thing I had the whole race. So then the next race, I sent out pepperoni pizza and bean burritos to every place I would stop and eat.
Well, Like
It was
pepperoni pizzas. Pepperoni pizza is my favorite thing. I eat it almost after every race that I do. I reward myself after hard workouts or long weeks sometimes with just a, a large pepperoni pizza. So that doesn't surprise me. If I had to have a go-to food that I knew I would always want to eat, if I was going to have to guess, it would be pepperoni pizza. Like, so that doesn't alarm me at all. That
that's the reality of it. Not all this fancy stuff people take. It's, are you going to actually eat that?
Yeah, I mean it's a calorie in game, and
Exactly.
yeah, and that's also that's what the recovery thing is like it's a calorie game. It doesn't have to be the perfect carb to protein ratio. It doesn't have to be these super fancy ingredients.
That's
It's
great because you focus a lot on recovery, where I don't, because my next event isn't for a while.
yeah. I mean I think the first off the thing that you can do to recover the best is sleep. Like that's the first thing that the biggest component of recovery. I mean, that's why like reading about your Everest stuff and the lack of sleep that was going on in those 60 days. That's what really was alarming to me. It was not something that I had put any thought to, because like obviously you think about the physical challenges of getting up the mountain, but the sleep quality and stuff and what you were going through, because that is the number one thing that's going to help your body repair itself. It's also going to let your brain rest
Right.
from the stressful activities. So sleeping and eating healthy are probably the two, and drinking water. I mean, like when people start getting into the what I call the 1% of recovery, you've kind of taken it too far. Like, from my perspective. But yeah, I mean, because my next training set, I mean, a lot of days I train twice a day, sometimes 3 times with a weightlifting session in the day as well. So, it is kind of about fueling your body, not just from what you've done before, but what's going to come next. So they are while there's some similarities between how one might would approach eating for running and long adventure races or Iditarides or anything like that. There's some similarities. They are the ultimate goals are kind of very different. But it is nice to know that somebody else out there would have pepperoni pizza at their ride stations, and that and it's not, if I can't, how, like, from somebody that's come from Southern California in so many years, like, how have you managed the cold? Because that's just like, I lived in the mountains. I grew up in South Carolina and then moved to the mountains in North Carolina and was there for 7 years. And dealing with the cold was like the thing that I hated the absolute most. And it's not near the conditions that you were dealing with.
Oh yeah, Southern California. I mean, the coldest it ever got there was like 50, and then I'd be like in an Arctic suit or something. No, I hate being cold. I hate being cold. I have my house temperature up here set at 76 in the winter. It's just, I hate being cold. And people are like, well, wait a second. What are you doing these extreme outdoor things for?
Yeah, that are exclusively in the cold.
And there is no respite. Somebody asked me, I posted a picture of the tent up at 26,000 feet at Camp 4. And they go, does that keep you warm? And I go, no, nothing.
Nothing does.
Nothing. You have a sleeping bag, and you better buy a good one. That's it. There is no break on either event. And so, yeah, that's sort of weird, isn't it? We were talking about things that drive us to do this. Mm-hmm. I can't explain it. I hate it, though. I hate being cold, but
okay,
I like the sports.
Yeah, you taught. I always told people, because I would complain through the winter, every winter, and like, it would be sometimes 10 or 15 out and snowing sideways, and I had teammates that would be wearing shorts and a long sleeve shirt, and I would be bundled up. If it's below 50, I'm gonna have long tights and hats on and gloves, because my hands get cold so easy. Like if it's below 55, I have to put gloves on when I run, because my hands just get cold. But like on one of the races, this is blow your mind.
is I was out and I had to camp out in the wilderness. There weren't any checkpoints. It was a long, long leg of the race. And a storm would come in. So it was 50 below when I stopped the dogs and camped them down, put their straw down and bedded them down, and they're fine. They got the big coats and I put coats on them and they're fine. But it was 50 below, the wind was picking up and it was getting colder. It dropped to 70 below and the winds got to 30 miles an hour. They calculated it equaled 100 below zero. And we had to rest for 5 hours in that. Now, I got in my sled in all my sleeping bag and all my gears, and it was like I was naked outside in 50 below weather. That was tough.
That's the coldest you've ever been.
Yes. I hope never to be in that kind of cold again.
Yeah, that's stuff you don't even want to wish on your worst enemy. Like that sort of condition. That's absolutely wild. Yeah, I mean, because nothing at that temperature can. I mean, how do you even get fluids in when it's that cold?
You don't. I didn't do anything.
Yeah, would water just turn to vapor at that point?
Well, I heated the water for the dogs because the dogs need their water.
Yeah.
Especially in the cold temperatures. So I make a really high calorie stew for them out of the snow.
Mm-hmm.
So I can drink water out of that water where I've melted the snow. But honestly, and you do have to be careful about your hydration out there. You really do. And after that, I just curled up in my sled as best I could and waited for the dogs so they could get their rest.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got up and carried on.
Yeah, that's how both of these feats. It's a lot of time in your own head.
Yes.
And a lot of time in isolation.
Yes.
And I don't know. People ask me dumb questions sometimes of like, well, what do you think about when you're running 10 miles, and it's like, I certainly haven't run out of things to think about. And I'm sure that when you're out there in those stressful conditions, you're not short on things to think about or worry about. Is there any I don't want to say mental strategies because it's not right. Is there anything that you spend a lot of time thinking about out there besides, I mean, obviously you miss your family, you're worrying about the conditions. Is there anything else that you kind of find yourself thinking about a lot while you're out there?
Well, when I'm running the dogs, when I'm with the dogs, you have to be very careful about what you're thinking about. Mm-hmm. Because what you're thinking affects your mood, and your mood affects the dogs, and you can't fake it with them. If you're anxious or afraid or mad or sad or whatever, you cannot fake it. They can tell immediately by reading your eyes. So you have to actually mentally have tricks for yourself to keep yourself happy and up and positive. Because if you don't, the dogs will pick it up and eventually they will just sit down and stop. It doesn't matter where you are, and they will not go again. So it's very tough on the Iditarod with the dogs to manage your mental game.
Yeah, so you got to be really on point. Then I didn't even think about that. Like obviously, like when you're running a sled, it's probably similar to driving a motorcycle, where you've got to be like locked in and focused on what's ahead and what's in front of you, and like locked in. If you're daydreaming, call it daydreaming, it's probably not a good thing.
Right.
So you're probably in the zone, but I didn't even think about the dog thing, because anybody that's ever had a dog or lived with a dog knows that they're incredibly sensitive to how you feel, your mood, and what you're going through. Probably even more so than some people even realize, which is why they're such loving creatures, and have probably, that not probably, but that have been around us for so long, and why people probably really enjoy having them around, because they are very, very, probably even more attuned to it than people are, honestly.
No, I think they are, yeah.
And they're certainly not going to say anything rude to you about your health. Like, Right? They're not going to say, well, you don't look sick. They know you're sick and they understand you. Right? Like,
Yeah.
they're going to be like, I don't understand it. I don't understand why you feel bad. You don't look sick. Like, they
Yeah.
know. They know. God, I didn't even think about that. Um, that's a whole nother, what are some of the tricks then that you've kind of figured out for yourself to like make sure that you stay positive and stay on it? Is there any other any other easy mantra like the 10 feet ahead that you've come up with?
No, I just focus on positive things. You know,
Okay.
if you've come through a really rough section or a really scary section, a really dangerous section, or crashed or broke your sled or whatever it is, it's done. You can
Okay.
file it away, you learn from it, you file it away, and you let it go and you move on. Okay, we've got to, you just change everything to the positive. And people say, aren't you lonely out there? And I'm like, how can I be lonely? I have all these dogs. I just, when they're resting, I can go out and get a big hug from them or kiss or whatever, and or stop for a break and talk to them, and they wagging their tails and smiling at me. It's just amazing if you let it, you know, just let
Yeah,
go
no,
of all the negative stuff and don't worry about all the stuff ahead of you. Just be in the moment and stay positive.
yeah, that's I mean, God, the lessons for that for life, I think are endless. Because it is really easy, especially as somebody that's got a rare disease, to get hung up on all of the negative things that have happened, and things that have stopped us from, you know, doing what we wanted to do, or the way that we felt, and the fear of missing out, or the things that you've missed out on. But ultimately, like, if you are going to get anywhere and have success, like, you have to kind of let those things, you really do. You have to let those things go if you're going to ultimately get where you want to go. And in, like, in the Iditarod for you, that's like getting to the finish line and getting there alive, and getting there with all of your dogs alive and across that line. So, and in life, that's like, obviously, reaching your goals, and living a healthy, balanced life of letting those things go, and making sure that you can move on from those traumatic things, because they are, losing your vision and ending up with a rare disease. Like, those are traumatic things that would cripple a lot of people. And to get a little bit of insight here, and how you've managed those is, from reading your book, and from you, luckily coming on here and chatting with me a little bit about it, is incredibly inspiring. And I love listening to how other crazy people get through stuff. Like, I remember I told my girlfriend, who's been with me for the last 9 years, really, through the majority of my illness. I got diagnosed in 2008, so I got the award a year after you, and I got diagnosed a year after you. So, you know, like, I was like, I recognize her, her crazy. Like, I recognize this. Like, it's totally geared towards something completely different, but I recognize this, and recognize some of those thought patterns and stuff. And I can't thank you enough for what you've done for our community, and the inspiration that you've brought to so many over the years. Because I think is unfortunately a very short list in our community of people that have done incredible things, and you are one of those people. So, and you kind of in some ways paved a path for me to be able to share my story, and work with the Vasculitis Foundation, and inspire other people. So I can't thank you enough for what you've done. And I know that no other way. But I'm certainly glad that you exist.
Well, thank you. You too. You've taken the word and run with it literally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's because I tell people all the time, like, if I ever figure out what I'm running from, I might stop. Like, so, but yeah, it's just, having people in our community that are willing to still live life is such a powerful thing. And then not just live life, but share it with others. So, I'm glad that you have a book out there, that people can digest and read. And, I know you don't do a ton of outreach, work anymore. And I, in some ways, applaud you for that. That you can, have your little life up there in Alaska off the grid and just focus on living your dream. And, to kind of coin the podcast, you've gone the distance and, managed to set up a life that, that you can live, and manage your disease and also be happy chasing your dream. So I think it's powerful, and a lot of people can learn from it.
Well, thanks.
So, if people are interested in your book, is it still on Amazon? If the people are interested in picking up your book and stuff, yep. Okay. So Cindy's book's out on Amazon. I'll put the link to that in the show notes and stuff. And Cindy, stay healthy. I guess. You said it's the summer melt. What is the summer melt temperature wise in Alaska right now, where you're at?
Right now, it's your favorite temperature, 50 degrees.
Nice. Nice. I didn't know quite how warm it got there. I mean, obviously it's got to get above 32 for stuff to melt, but 19 hours of daylight sounds lovely.
It is.
Sleeping's probably difficult.
Everything's.
Yeah. Yeah, everything's we got a lot of rain right now, but stuff will be quickly brown here with the lack of rain, I'm sure, over the summer, as generally happens. But yeah, Cindy, thank you so much for doing this and being so inspirational for so many people. And that will conclude everything here. I'm going to stop recording. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you like what you heard, don't forget to click the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast. That way you don't miss a single episode. It is the last few days of Vasculitis Awareness Month, so we do ask, and I understand that this is a very trying time right now, and not everybody has the means, but if you do have the means, please donate to the Vasculitis Foundation. You can do that by going to www.vasculitisfoundation.org. Or when you're shopping on Amazon, we've got the Vasculitis Foundation has an Amazon Smile account, so you can shop and raise money or give money to the Vasculitis Foundation. So please do that. And as always, guys, keep going out there and chasing your dreams.